DVD Netflix presents its first annual First Watch Shamely Awards. Since early 2020, folks have been gathering around their internet streaming devices in anticipation of the ceremony that will begin in your earholes shortly. You will join James and Cinema Shame co-creator Nick Britt as they honor the creators of the finest entertainment ever in the history of movies, based on whatever they chose to watch in the year 2020.
No matter what you think you see, you'll find it's not enough. No matter what you think you know, you won't get through. No matter how that film is shown, what always ends the same. Another strain with five sane with no town. You can figure it for real as you kick up every heel. But man, what you do, they're gonna take you.
Welcome back to Cinema Shame. My name is James Patrick. Along with me today is Nick Britt. He is Campbell Dropout on the Twitters. And Nick is actually the person responsible for Cinema Shame, going on 5 or 6 years now. And I've invited him on here tonight to discuss our favorite first-time watches of the year 2020.
Even though I will say 2020 has been a rough year, and I think it has for everybody. But I will say, I thought my movie watching would be a little bit higher, but I guess towards like August, September, my movie watching just like fell off, and I just didn't watch as much quality stuff as I thought I would. But I still got some good first times in there, so I'm still overall happy.
Well, I feel like there were two kinds of movie watchers in 2020, and there were those that lined up that watch pile and stacked it just as high as it would go, bricking in an entire coronavirus room to keep out all the bad. And then there are others, I think I fall into this category, who fell back on a lot of old favorites. So I was watching and sharing movies I was very familiar with my kids, and I got into certain ruts with actors and series of films, and I enjoyed the comfort of being able to disappear in a movie that I knew really well.
And I'd say for this year, I watched a lot of Spike Lee filmography, just with the stuff that went on this summer. And I feel like he would be a good artist to watch to kind of get a better grasp on that. And then also just comfort food in like Spider-Man. I think I rewatched those. We had my brother-in-law was here, so we would all watch them together. So just a lot of comfort, a lot of new stuff. But I don't think I really hit anything for 2020, like new releases. But the list was good to compile, even though not knowing until after 2020 was over that I was going to be compiling this list. But
You're welcome.
Overall, I'm pretty proud.
I keep it lively. We're going to do this in an awards format style. We're recounting the best of what we watched by placing in the categories. So we've broken down our movies into some traditional style categories, like supporting actor, actress, director. You'll get the picture. We're each going to nominate 5. I mean, sometimes I fudge it and make it 6 because I don't want to exclude someone. But after we state our nominees, we'll pick the winner and talk a little bit about why that performance or why that movie stands out so much as we're looking back on our year of movie watching 2020. I've been doing this format over on my blog at 30hertzrumble.com for a few years, and it occurred to me, I don't know why I hadn't brought it over here, because it's what Cinema Shame is. It's a celebration of reaching out and finding these new movies, finally watching those classics that have seemed a little bit daunting. And, quite often I found that when I actually sit down and scratch off those shame statement movies, they're ones that do seem to make it onto these lists, even though I've put off watching them for so very long. So that's the way this is going to work. We are going to start with
Favorite supporting actor.
Ray Liotta in Something Wild as Ray Sinclair. Jonathan Demme film was actually very early during the shutdown, so I think probably about March. Blown away by that performance. Walter Matthau in King Creole. I don't feel like I've ever seen Matthau in a villainous role. Maybe Dennis the Menace. Even then, it's not truly a villain. But yeah,
he would like it if you don't bring that movie up, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, and that was like a recent release with the Paramount Classics. Bruce Dern in That Championship Season. Be honest, anything I see Bruce Dern in is probably going to be one of my favorites. Basically, he plays a very sleazy mayor, I think, of Scranton. Samuel L. Jackson in Jungle Fever. His character's name's Gator, which is just a great name, thanks to Burt Reynolds. And then this is probably the most off one, but Gary Busey as Doc Hawkins in Surviving the Game.
Oh yeah,
really,
that's a classic right there.
Oh yeah, just over. I don't know, not as over the top as Predator 2, but very close. But very fun.
It's not the craziest
entertaining.
Busey I've seen.
No, and I guess it's crazy just how those early '90s, like how he was just off of it. So the winner is Ray Liotta in Something Wild.
How about dessert?
Yeah, let me have the Rustler's Rhapsody.
Rustlers.
Just coffee for me. Darlene.
In a flash.
You don't mind, do you, Ray?
Charlie, you gotta be out of your mind. You don't know what you're doing.
Charlie! You are one dumb son of a bitch. I'm almost starting to like you, Charlie.
Here you go.
Thanks, Darlene. I want Lulu. Is that your name this week? Lulu?
Yes.
You know, Charlie, she's not going to be too happy driving around in a station wagon the rest of her life. You better think about that. You better ask yourself if you really want her. I really want her.
Great.
Charlie, you gotta fight for a woman like this.
I don't have to fight you, Ray. I'm gonna take Lulu. We're gonna waltz right out of here, and there's not a damn thing you can do.
Oh, Charlie, you are something. You are something. Take a look over there.
This is earlier, prior to Goodfellas. I think, I don't know how many years, maybe 4 to 6. And it honestly feels like a lot of Ray Liotta's roles, but I think he does it so well. And it was just refreshing because I felt like I got to a point where I just watched Goodfellas so much that, I knew that movie so well, and I just felt like the movie was kind of losing its touch. But this was Something Wild. Him just playing the villain as Ray Sinclair was just a great performance. And then just towards the end, Jonathan Demme's close-up shots are just great looking shots in the movie, and just a standout performance in my opinion. And I just wasn't expecting it from a young Ray Liotta. And I will say, even I think this is the year I've kind of respected Ray Liotta. I just finished watching him Killing Them Softly, and his underrated performance in Heartbreakers is a
Heartbreakers
classic.
does not get enough attention. I really enjoy that movie.
My wife had turned me on to that movie, and I'm supportive of anything with Gene Hackman, but yeah, Ray Liotta, Gene Hackman, Sigourney Weaver. It's just a great Heartbreakers, just an entertaining film, and I'd recommend watching it if you haven't seen it.
And Something Wild's got a great cast in it. So I don't always think Melanie Griffith is necessarily talented. I think that she's always Melanie Griffith, but Jonathan Demme really seemed to know how to use her in this movie. And Jeff Daniels too, not to leave him out of the conversation. But really, this is a super starring role for Melanie Griffith.
Really entertaining movie, and a great Demi. I mean, his filmography was too short, but it's a great film.
Yeah, that's a good pick. So my list has it's interesting. I knew who was going to be the winner in this category even before I assembled the other nominees. That one performance to me was such an outstanding representation that I just needed to fill in the other gaps. Some of these aren't necessarily maybe the best performances, but they're the ones that really stood out for me. Walter Brennan in Blood on the Moon, 1948. He's playing Walter Brennan, and I'm never not going to enjoy Walter Brennan in a Western, so he snuck in there because of that. Next, we have Richard Conte in The Big Combo, and I talked about Richard Conte on the last Cinema Shame episode, talking about The Big Combo, and he is just pure evil, pure menace all the way through. He's probably like a supporting actor and a half in that movie. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in The Young at Heart, 1938, and I can honestly say I never thought I would be championing a Douglas Fairbanks Jr. role as a standout performance of my year, but The Young at Heart is quite a special movie, and he has perfected the Fairbanks Jr. smarm. Peter Lawford and Clooney Brown. Again, we're talking about character actors doing exactly what they do best, and Peter Lawford is playing an uppity British gentleman. And then finally, and this is my winner, Robert Preston and Victor Victoria from 1982.
There was once a shady dame from Seville. Used to wander around the town dressed to kill. And men, if they dared, stood and stared when she passed their way. The lady knocked them out. There's no doubt. Yes, was a shout. Olé, oh, Mary. Seville isn't that much to shout about, but when she was out, traffic stood still. My God, you did it. Dressed like a vamp or a tramp, blown a tramp.
So Victor Victoria has been on my list to watch, my Sin and Shame list, for a couple years now, and I finally watched it. I didn't love Victor Victoria, but the movie spawns such a great conversation about queerness, sexuality, gender identity, and at the heart of that whole movie is this absolutely wonderful friendship between Robert Preston's character, whose name is Toddy Todd, and Julie Andrews Victoria. Victoria, for those that haven't seen the movie, Victoria's an out-of-work singer. She meets Toddy, Robert Preston's character, and they kind of fall platonically in love. He's a gay man who gets fired from his job because he's being himself, like he's abrasive and loud and obnoxious. They bond over their failed love, failed careers, and just kind of the misery of being alive. And it's Toddy who creates Victoria's new facade or new character, that of Count Victor Grzinski, who is a homosexual Polish count who is billed as Europe's greatest female impersonator. The conceit of the whole movie is, and this false persona is so far-fetched that it almost makes sense that no one in the movie really questions it. It's a woman pretending to be a gay man, pretending to be a woman. And, Julie Andrews as Victor, of course, becomes a star, and the challenge then becomes upholding the image as the fame she garners and a new love interest intervene in her plans. James Garner sees her act and can't believe she's actually not a woman. As the two interact, Victoria as Victor, it's hard to keep this straight when you're talking about it, challenges all of his assumptions and homophobia. I mean, the whole movie, the whole character is a high wire act, both on screen and the subtext of the film. And while Andrews is absolutely great, it's Robert Preston's role that performs sort of the greatest song and dance. He's a flamboyant homosexual, but doesn't fall into that stock best friend archetype. He's so comfortable in this character that as a viewer, I think we're naturally inclined to try and put that kind of personality in a box. Like our expectations are so defined by the movies that we've watched, and he breaks all of it. The performance is broadly funny, but he's also very tender and emotional with Julie Andrews. Their friendship is just lovely. And without that performance, I think that's the anchor. And it kind of really lifts up all of the good stuff that Blake Edwards does in Victor Victoria.
Favorite supporting actress?
Florence Pugh. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but Little Women, playing Amy. Never read the books, never saw any of the previous versions of this movie, but really enjoyed it. When we saw it, I think we saw it like around January of. So it was like one of the first movies of 2020 that I saw. But really enjoyed her performance, enjoyed the overall movie, was really impressed with it. And this is where I felt like I was kind of really starting to grasp for things, and I just assume it's mainly because of the lack of movies I watched, or the movies I watched just didn't have the best or enough strong female characters in it. But next, Diana Rigg in the hospital. Not a great movie.
Yeah.
The movie I wasn't a huge fan of. Felt a little bit over the top. Felt like a very a Scrubs murder mystery type. Like you mixing the Scrubs TV show with a murder mystery in the middle. But interesting writing. It's good to see George Scott lose his shit. That's always entertaining.
It is true. I mean, yeah.
But as for seeing a different performance from Diana Rigg, whereas I've only seen her in either Game of Thrones or The Avengers or On Her Majesty's Secret Service, so this felt like something completely stepping outside of that. And overall, thought it was a good performance. Would say
also,
it is.
I also know it's written by Patty Chayefsky. We can talk about Patty Chayefsky again in a minute.
Oh yeah, he pops back up later in my list. But yeah, interesting movie. I've had that Twilight for a while, and I think she passed away this year. Was it this year? Yeah, and so I finally decided to sit down and watch it. But overall, entertaining. I mean, a good performance from her end. Movie's kind of middle of the road. And I was going in with high hopes. Diana Rigg, George Scott, Patty Chayefsky. Written movie, but it just wasn't there for me.
It's an interesting mishmash of genres, and there's certainly some great stuff in there. But I think you're absolutely right. It all depends on your willingness to go along with that really off-kilter tone. It's an unusual film. Could only happen in the 70s. I love saying that, but some of these movies really could only happen in the 70s.
Oh yeah, I agree. It is a dark comedy mashed, or like a dark comedy about instead of whereas MASH was set like in a field hospital in a war, this is more of a dark comedy regarding the bureaucracy of being in a hospital. So just the pains having to be chief medical officer. Mary Beth Hurt in The World According to Garp, and also Glenn Close in The World According to Garp. So this is watched this later or later in the year. So starring Robin Williams. Basically, it's a John Irving book, and it was directed by George Roy Hill. I don't know if it was his last movie, but it was like towards the end of his career. Kind of turning upside down that whole mother, single mom situation in regards to raising a child. It really kind of turns that up on her head and is actually like a true free woman from her performance and just that character story. But yeah, so just four. I feel
I think
like
we should mention that Georgia Hill, that movie was Funny Farm.
Oh, was it? What?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that his
Believe
last
it-
movie, Funny Farm?
George Roy Hill's final film was Funny Farm.
I've not seen it. Chevy Chase movie, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for best supporting actress, I want to give it to Glenn Close.
Pardon me. My name is Jenny Fields. Are you a prostitute?
What's it to you?
Hello, my name is Garb. My mother and I were just passing by.
Your mother?
I'll be glad to pay you.
Oh, yes, you see, my mother.
I don't go for no kinky stuff. You want any of that, you go over to 8th Avenue.
Oh, no, she just wants to talk
Well, what's
to you.
your regular charge for what you do?
You know, ask you a few questions.
Would $10 be enough?
$10?
What's the usual charge?
Hell, Mom, I don't know. It depends, but...
I'll give you 20. And we'll go someplace where we can get a cup of coffee and get warm and talk.
You pay for the coffee?
Of course.
Oh, what the hell.
Because I believe this was her first film role, I think, which I was kind of surprised. I assumed she'd been around. I think she was in theater first, but I really thought she had been around longer than like the early 80s or the mid 80s, I think, was when The World According to Garp came out.
My supporting actress nominees. Oddly enough, I had two performances from the same movie, and I didn't want to separate them. So I did the same thing you did. But I counted them as one, so I cheated. Eileen Brennan and Cloris Leachman from Daisy Miller, Peter Bogdanovich's 1974 period drama. Every time they weren't on screen, the movie kind of got a little bit saggy. Like they were like firecrackers on screen. And Sybil Shepherd is okay. I think she gets kind of a bad rap for her performance, probably because of her relationship with Peter Bogdanovich. Like she only got the role because she was with him at the time. But Sybil Shepherd is capable in Daisy Miller. The male lead, whose name I will never remember because he is just a wet puddle of blanket. He is so forgettable and so blah for the entire movie. And I know I should remember his name, and I apologize for
Barry
not
Brown.
being able. That's the one.
Pulling up IMDb. I'm not pulling this from.
Pulling up on. He
was
so
in Piranha.
boring. And when you get to Eileen Brennan and Cloris Leachman, they are not toning their abilities or their personalities down to act alongside Barry Brown. They are running circles around everyone in that cast. Then I have what may have been the most surprising performance of the year for me in this category is Scarlett Johansson in Jojo Rabbit.
No, I really enjoyed that film. I feel like it got a lot of hate.
I heard a lot of people saying very negative things about the movie, and after watching it, I just kind of shrugged because it was such a creative use of the subject matter. We don't need just another dour World War II Holocaust movie. We're full up. And Taika Waititi really turned that material on its head by making it bittersweet and really funny and still having that emotional weight. And that emotional weight really rested on Scarlett's shoulders. And she pulled it off. I have never claimed to be a fan of Scarlett Johansson. She's great to look at on screen, but I've never considered her an actress until that movie. Next, I have Jean Moreau in Elevator to Gallows. Really, it comes down to her ability just to command the screen. Her presence on film is just something you can't look away from. And finally, I have Gene Wallace from The Big Combo, 1955 again. I'm trying to temper this statement, but it might be one of the greatest unsung female performances in American film noir. Crazy as that movie got, she hangs with it all, and Really a tremendous performance. My pick here is Lillian Gish for Night of the Hunter.
Shame on you, Ruby. Running around the house after that mad dog of a man. Merciful heavens. Ruby, go get the children out of bed and bring them down here. Women are such germ fools. It's a hard world for little things.
When Charles Lawton made Night of the Hunter, it seems very clearly that he had D.W. Griffith on the brain. He creates such a pastoral quality to his rural southern setting, and the people that inhabit this place. But he's also revealing some of that dark underbelly behind the Norman Rockwell, in the form of Robert Mitchum's Harry Powell, Reverend Powell. He's a man that's so driven by hate and the need to purify. He's at once conjuring this ideal pastoral, but in the same breath, he's reacting against it. He pulls out the mania that's kind of bubbling up from beneath this fake serenity. So with this logic in mind, it seems like it's perfect sense that he would then cast Lillian Gish in this movie as she was Griffith's greatest actress. She starred in Broken Blossoms, which is my favorite Griffith movie. It's a beautiful melodrama, and I'm not going to get into all the problematic issues with D.W. Griffith. Suffice to say that he made a few truly historical films. One terrible historical film, but another podcast. So early in her career, she played sort of a virginal heroine, porcelain skin, soulful eyes. She kind of felt like Griffith's muse. So in here, she's also kind of playing a version of herself, but in this movie, she's the hardened beacon that's weathered the storm of this long-standing, simmering hatred. She's not the picture of impressional femininity anymore. She's an adversary that's fighting back against Mitchum's villain. And she is able to take him on because she's seen these things, the terrible things that Mitchum represents, the stuff that these small towns have long suppressed in order to save face. She's survived and outlived men like Harry Powell. So as she takes on this ersatz motherly role for these orphan children and protects them from this villain, she appears to be sort of a waif, but she's actually the storm and the power that Harry thinks he is, which is why she's able to overcome, I think, without argument, one of the greatest villains ever put on screen.
And it's been a while since I've seen Night of the Hunter, but yeah, I remember its performance is amazing, and I remember the creepy scene of Shelley Winters at the bottom.
Oh, that movie is just filled with images that just get emblazoned on your brain.
Oh yeah,
it's one of those that I was embarrassed to admit not having seen. Like, I would never say I hadn't seen Night of the Hunter, and I think this is the second time I've ever admitted it. That I wasn't just born with Night of the Hunter in my blood, but I hadn't seen it until it was early this year. It was on my list, and I thought it was damn near a perfect movie.
favorite actress?
Melanie Griffith in Something Wild. And this kind of following up, this would be a good connection. Julie Andrews for the Americanization of Emily. And this was a weird, I did watch this, I couldn't sleep, and I was like, I need to watch something. I had this sitting on the shelf and popped it in, and was completely surprised. I was expecting just some kind of, with it being black and white, maybe something kind of Marty-like, where it was just kind of a simple romance. Was not expecting such a anti-war film, and where it goes and what it becomes. I was honestly surprised by that.
Weird and wonderful, isn't it?
It's the Arabian Nights. Do you have chests of rubies in the bathroom?
Just perfumes and liquor.
I've heard about this room, Commander. All the girls talk about it, but I just couldn't believe it. Bergdorf Goodman, Saks Fifth Avenue, Lord and Ted. Sheila's right, it is the swankiest shop in town. Good heavens, Arpège perfume. How did you manage Arpège with the Germans in Paris? There are Germans in Paris, aren't there? There is a war on, I think. You Americans must have heard something about it, I'm sure.
Just pick out a dress, honey, and be back at 5:30. You American haters bore me to tears, Miss Barham. I've dealt with Europeans all my life. I know all about us parvenus from the States who come over here and race around your old cathedral towns with our cameras and Coca-Cola bottles. Brawl in your pubs, paw your women, and act like we own the world. We overtip, we talk too loud, we think we can buy anything with a Hershey bar. I've had Germans and Italians tell me how politically ingenuous we are. And perhaps so. But we haven't managed a Hitler or Mussolini yet. I've had Frenchmen call me a savage because I only took half an hour for lunch. Hell, Miss Barham, the only reason the French take 2 hours for lunch is because the service in their restaurants is lousy. The most tedious of the lot are you British. We crass Americans didn't introduce war into your little island. This war, Miss Barham, to which we Americans are so insensitive, is the result of 2,000 years of European greed, barbarism, superstition, and stupidity. Don't blame it on our Coca-Cola bottles. Europe was a going brothel long before we came to town.
Dear me, what an outburst.
So lay off, Mrs. Miniver. If you don't like our Hershey bars, don't take them. Pick yourself a frock or get out. It's not my job to listen to your sentimental contempt.
You know, I could almost believe you flew for the RAF.
I never flew for the RAF, and you know it.
You didn't expect me to believe you for a minute, did you?
Not for a minute.
But why, Commander?
You're here, Miss Barham.
Yes, so I am. You're a complete rascal. I'll be back at 5:30.
The Admiral will be delighted you're coming.
I'm looking forward to it.
If I can be of any service, Miss Barham.
Oh, I have my own clothes, Commander. I'll do without your Hershey bars.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I think it was the early '60s, right?
64.
Yeah, 64. So that was like a complete surprise. Was not expecting something, especially. Maybe that time period sounds a little bit makes more sense now, knowing what happened. But yeah, just not expecting such a heavy anti-war film, and especially in regards to storming Normandy.
Yeah.
But yeah, great performance from Julie Andrews as played a nurse, wartime nurse in England. Okay, so these are two names I'm probably going to butcher, but this was a very early watch. In the year, something I really enjoyed. Wish I was able to see this at the theater, but it was right before, or it was right around the time that we had the shutdown and everything in regards to COVID. But it's Nomi Merlant and Adele Haniel. Basically, they were the two leads in Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Just a beautiful movie. Amazing performances from both of them, and I would find it really hard to slice like which one was supporting or the just overall actress. I feel like they're both the two leads in the movie. But yeah, one of my favorite films of the year, or I guess probably first time watches. Even though I think it would be classified as maybe 2019 maybe. But yeah, really wish I'd seen this on the big screen. It looked beautiful. Just here at home on the little whatever 40 something inch. But next. Merrill Hemingway in Star 80. Caught this TCM. I tried the TCM free trial to watch the Star 80 episode, and I think this was also when I can't remember the podcast. the Forgotten Hollywood. I can't think of it. I don't know if that's the name of it, but I think they were discussing some of the Star 80 pieces and regarding the Bogdanovich, and something I really did not know anything about. But I think she gives a wonderful performance in Star 80 as the can't remember her name, but the female or the main character. And then my sixth pick is Annabella Sciorra, Scirra. But she is Angie Tucci in Jungle Fever, which was a Spike Lee movie we watched earlier this year, and really impressed with that film and with the performance that she gave. But as of these groups, I'd say the best performance, I'd have to give it to Meryl Hemingway for Star 80.
That's room 217, 218, 219 at the Beverly Hilton.
No, I can't really. Oops, that's not the way we're supposed to do that. That's called the bunny dip.
Extremely dark movie, but a great performance. Bob Fosse directed. Great movie, dark movie. Kind of my wheelhouse. This was an amazing performance on her part. And I'd highly recommend anybody seeking that out, even less than a supporting actor, but Cliff Robertson, which I'm a fan of, even though I don't feel like he did lose a lot of steam like towards the 70s. And so he wasn't in as much. In there. Yeah. So Hugh Hefner. And I think he actually does a good job. He seems like a schemy person. And basically, it's just a dark movie on how a young girl is kind of pulled into that world and how nobody's really looking out for her and just using her. And I think it paints them like they should be painted, as in that they both were just using her and really had no care for what happened to her in the end.
It really is it's a movie that kind of fell through the 80s cracks. It's not something that gets talked about among the best movies of the decade. And
well, it's a tough watch. I mean, it's tough. It's not light and entertaining. I mean, and I haven't seen all of Bob Fosse stuff, but I mean, like thinking all that jazz. I mean, at least all that jazz has that it paints over being a musical, like kind of hides some of the darkness in it. It's still there, but it's got there's a bit of
I guess you could feel like there's some of that Bob Fosse sparkle that's there that makes it go down a little bit easier. This Star 80 doesn't have that sparkle.
Bogdanovich isn't look good. I don't think he and I think that's an accurate portrayal from what I've read and seen. Like they were all just seeming to use Dorothy Stratton.
I watched this movie not too long ago, and at the time I remember reading Roger Ebert's review just when I was looking up other critical opinions, and I remember this line. I don't know why it stuck in my head. He says, "There were times when I could hardly keep my eyes on the screen, and a moment near the end when I seriously asked myself if I wanted to stay in the theater. And yet I think this is an important movie, devastating, violent, hopeless, and important because it holds a mirror up to a part of the world we live in and helps us see it more clearly."
Eric Roberts' character is just such a sleazy piece of shit. And
he's just doing those Eric Roberts things, though, isn't he? I mean,
yeah. I mean, oh man, talk about somebody. Well, I mean, and it's a crazy performance from him in that sense. But in the end, it's just a sad and depressing movie. But I mean, I think it tells an important story and what it's showing and how.
And the performance. I mean, if you go into it and maybe the subject matter and maybe the tone of the movie are difficult to stomach, but the on a performance level, it's a tremendous accomplishment, and it's very easy to go in clinically and appraise it that way. If you need something to latch on to and convince yourself that maybe this is a way you should be spending your time, even though Roger Ebert said he wanted to walk out of the theater. In the best way, he said that, though. My list for actress was very long. I had a lot of performances this year that really stood out, and I whittled it down as best I could. First, some of the performances that I left off, and it's kind of killing me, but I'm going to cheat because it's my podcast and I can do shit like that. Barbara Stanwyck in Ball of Fire didn't make it. Jane Greer in Out of the Past didn't make it. Janet Gaynor in The Young at Heart, the movie I just mentioned, it was probably the best performance of Janet Gaynor's career. Saoirse Ronan in Little Women, I was totally impressed by. I love her, and that movie stands out in my mind for the year. Cicely Tyson in Sounder, which was the first time I'd seen that movie as part of the Stay at Home TCMF festival that we had programmed for us. So all those, I've mentioned them. I don't feel so bad anymore. Now for the 5 that made the list: Julie Andrews, The Americanization of Emily.
Wow.
Next, Julie Christie in McCabe and Mrs. Miller from 1971. Little surprise, this little nobody made it. Katharine Hepburn in Summertime, 1955. Jennifer Jones in Clooney Brown, 1946. I should make mention that this Jennifer Jones performance was so surprising for me because I've never seen her be this funny. And there's, let's see, like maybe 2 Jennifer Jones performances that really even stand out in my brain as being notable. But this one was just such a joy. And then finally, I had Carole Lombard in True Confession from 1937, which is, if I'm being honest, not a great movie, but it's my favorite version of Carole Lombard, the kind of manic Carole Lombard that we get in My Man Godfrey, the one who can talk a mile a minute and has this amazing verbal cadence. And in that movie, she's playing, she's married to Fred McMurray. She's like a short story writer and a compulsive liar. So she likes to spin stories and everything she says, kind of. She doesn't do it. There's no malice behind it, but she can't help but embrace a good story when it takes shape. And she ends up being tried and convicted of murder because she likes the way the story goes. She actually had nothing to do with the murder, but that's just the way her brain worked. And then she ends up admitting to it just because, like I said, it's a better story. But it's super funny, and it's a screwball comedy that kind of goes out of its way to have, like, at any point, if she had just said, I didn't do it, it probably would have been okay. So it's maddening in certain ways, but I can't deny how much I enjoyed her performance in the movie.
Hey, I'm looking at a amazing picture of Fred McMurray with a ridiculous looking mustache. I need to check this out.
It's a fun movie, but it's not one of my favorites. I think I talk about another one. I watched a lot of Carole Lombard this year. I was catching up on a bunch of ones that I hadn't watched yet. So, some deep cuts. Anyway, enough about Carole Lombard. She didn't win. My winner for Best Actress is Julie Christie in McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Listen, Mr. McCabe, I'm a whore and I know an awful lot about whorehouses. And I know that if you had a house up here, you stand and make yourself a lot of money. Now, this is all you've got to do. Put up the money for the house. I'll do all the rest. I'll look after the girls, the business, the expenses, the running, the furnishing, everything. And I'll pay you back any money you put in the house so you won't lose nothing. And we'll make it 50-50.
Excuse me, I already got a whorehouse operating.
You can't call them crib cows whores. I'm talking about a proper sporting house with class girls and clean linen and proper hygiene.
Well, I don't think you're going to find my clientele up here too interested in that sort of thing.
They will be once they get a taste of it. I'm telling you, with someone up here to handle all them punters properly, you can make yourself at least double the money you make on your own.
What makes you think I ain't thought of that already? Them tents, it's just temporary.
What do you do when one girl fancies another? How do you know when a girl really has a monthly or when she's just taken a few days off? What about when they don't get their monthlies? Because they don't. What do you do then? I suppose you know all about seeing to that. And what about the customers? Who's going to skin them back and inspect them? You going to do that? Because if you don't, this town will be clapped up inside of 2 weeks if it's not already. What about when business is slow? You're just going to let the girls sit around on their bums? Because I'll tell you something, Mr. McCabe. When a good whore gets time to sit around and think, 4 out of 5 times you turn to religion, because that's what they was born with. And when that happens, you find yourself filling the bloody church down there instead of your own pockets. Now, I haven't got a lot of time to sit around and talk to a man who's too dumb to see a good proposition when it's put to him. Do we make a deal or don't we?
So McCabe and Mrs. Miller, being a Robert Altman film, imposes certain demands upon an actor. Acting is no longer merely saying your line or reacting to someone else speaking line. In an Altman film, someone is always speaking and someone is always reacting, and the camera wanders and roams and shows some characters and shows some other characters. And sometimes maybe even the character who's the subject of the scene is actually in focus on the camera. You never can tell. It would appear to someone who's never watched a Robert Altman film, perhaps, that no one's actually scripted this movie so much as just kind of given it a tone. It's like, a tone poem. Like, we want you to feel a certain way. And the more you watch Robert Altman, the more you feel how carefully curated every single second of his movies are. And the more I've watched, the more I've noticed that certain actors really excel in Robert Altman's school of filmmaking. Shelley Duvall stands out. Elliot Gould is a big one. The cerebral conversational actor. And in this movie, Warren Beatty was good. I like Warren Beatty. He's a great film personality, a good actor, and he's carried a number of hugely important movies. But I don't think I've ever really watched a movie because it was a Warren Beatty movie. Maybe Bulworth counts. And it's actually interesting that Altman wanted Elliot Gould in this role in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, but he had to cast Warren Beatty in order to sell it. They weren't going to produce it unless Warren Beatty was a star. I don't know exactly why. What about Warren Beatty doesn't feel like an equal to Altman in this movie? Maybe it's because he's a bigger star and he's still wielding some of that star persona. Like he's too much of a movie star for heading a Robert Altman movie. But then again, maybe this ultimately contributes to the impact of the ending of that film. And that's McCabe and Mrs. Miller could spawn 20 podcasts, and I wouldn't be able to really dig into all the things I feel about McCabe and Mrs. Miller, having now watched it for the first time. But I was struck most by Julie Christie, who was just brilliant in this role. She's very good in Fahrenheit 451, Petulia, Don't Look Now, and of course, Dr. Zhivago. I mean, God forbid I not mention Dr. Zhivago. But her performance in McCabe and Mrs. Miller just blew me away. In this movie, she's a madam looking to provide a new kind of whorehouse experience to a bunch of Pacific Northwest heathens in this mining town. And they're, I guess you could say, unaccustomed to such pleasantries. It comes off as a very difficult role. It's more than just being that tough-nosed prostitute, sort of cliche, the prostitute with a heart of gold sort of situation. And she's not exactly a lovable figure. She's not that at all, really. I guess in that sense, she stands out because she really does kind of tap into those qualities that make me love other Altman leading characters. She's scarred and worldly, but she's also tremendously fallible. And there's just so much gravity in that performance. Is this one you've seen? Because
but yeah, I mean, I love The Long Goodbye, but mainly Elliot Gould. Same thing with MASH. Even though I haven't watched MASH.
You could make the argument that McCabe and Mrs. Miller does the same thing to the Western that The Long Goodbye does to noir.
See, and I wonder if I wouldn't be able to, because I feel like my Western knowledge is not that deep. So I wonder if I'd be able to catch up on, I guess, what it's playing on, kind of like what The Long Goodbye was doing.
I think you know enough about the genre, just having absorbed the tropes and cliches to see what he's after. And it's
a Criterion release, correct?
Correct.
So I think, in fact, I probably own it. It's somewhere. That's a watch pile.
Okay. So I apologize for that Altman interlude. I know people, if I could like make gestures to turn your volume back up, I would.
Favorite actor?
This was a good list. It was kind of hard to narrow this down. But starting from top, Denzel Washington in He Got Game. Eric Roberts in Star 80, which is I feel like I've only seen 2 Eric Roberts movies, and I believe they're the high points, Star 80 and Runaway Train. And they're great performances. And I think he got nominated. Did he get nominated for Runaway Train? I think that's his only Oscar nomination. Yeah, so I know him from Star 80, Runaway Train, and those ads in the newspaper where he's like
he's got 3 Golden Globe nominations.
Good for Eric Roberts. Hey, dude, his output is amazing. He is probably one of the hardest.
Knight. You've seen The Dark Knight, surely.
Oh yeah, okay. I can't recall who he plays in The Dark Knight, but
doesn't matter.
All right, so he was in that. Eric Roberts in Star 80. James Garner for the Americanization of Emily. Wesley Snipes in Jungle Fever, and James Spader in Sex, Lies, and Videotapes.
Nice.
With Wesley Snipes, I feel like I do not give him enough credit. And I think Jungle Fever was a great performance, great Spike Lee movie. Really thought it handled interracial relationships. And I don't think Spike Lee paints over him for being a dick for cheating on his wife and leaving her. And, when I think of Wesley Snipes, I just think of Blade, and probably should look a little bit more closely at like his movies. I know he's got a lot of action movies. I keep seeing Passenger 57 on Netflix, but on the watch list. So we'll see going in with Jungle Fever. It's
a fun movie. I'm not sure that's where I'd hit up after that. If you, Wesley Snipes has always been an interesting actor to me, and once he started that action cycle, he kind of lost the early career luster, the promise that he had. And as a result, he's really, like you said, he's just kind of a punchline now. And that's unfair because he was really a great star.
Charlie, I'm a little surprised at you. Didn't your father ever teach you never send a boy to do a man's job?
Speaking of boys, our stewardess friend must be feeling particularly unsatisfied.
Charlie, you ever play roulette?
On occasion.
Well, let me give you a word of advice.
Always bet on black.
For a few years there, he was in Jungle Fever, New Jack City, White Man Can't Jump. And all 3 of these are tremendous performances in very good movies.
Yeah,
he anchored them.
And then Tony Scott favorite of mine, The Fan, with him and De Niro.
Yeah. Blade is a very good movie. It's a very good comic book adaptation. It's an entertaining action movie. The guy can act, and I think people forget that.
Oh yeah, and I watched him. He was in. We watched Chirac, another Spike Lee movie, and he plays kind of a role in it, and it feels over the top, and it is, but it's like over the top, but it's still. He makes it work, which especially in a musical where it's like or not a musical, but I guess it maybe classifies as a musical, but a movie where it's like spoken rhyme or word throughout, and he doesn't. It's not. I don't feel like you kind of laugh at first, like, oh, it's Wesley Snipes, but it's still a good performance. But as for the other people I selected, James Garner, great performance. Just really feel like I'm always surprised with everything I see him in. I picked up the Rockford Files on Blu-ray. I've been looking forward to watching those.
Was fun there. That's one of the greatest shows ever put on TV.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that because I'm just impressed with the Americanization of Emily. Just was not expecting where that went. In regard to, I just assuming a slapstick, and there is some slapstick or humor in it, but it just where it goes, to tonally with the movie. Was not expecting that. And so that was a good surprise. But James Spader, this was a very heavy James Spader year for me. Watched Jack's Back, and then The New Kids, and then Sex, Lies, and Videos tape. And I believe
have you seen Tough Turf?
No, I've not seen Tough Turf. Is that,
this will not be the first time I've recommended Tough Turf on the Cinema Machine podcast, but you need to watch Tough Turf.
Meet Morgan Hiller.
First day in a new school. You ready for it?
I always. He's got an attitude.
There's no backsliding on campus. Well, I was just sort of hoping I could take a quick ride through history.
You mind taking those off? I'd like to see who I'm talking to.
They've got a problem.
Let go of me!
Not until you tell me what your name is.
He lives in two worlds.
I'm sure Patty and Alan will vouch for us.
Always behind enemy lines.
You are not now, nor were you ever members of this club.
Just when I thought we were going to be good friends.
Tough Turf.
They took your car. I don't own a car, man.
He's a loner on a roll. An outsider on the edge. Caught between a dangerous loser.
Give his bike back.
And the girls they both love.
She belongs to Nick.
Come on, Jimmy. Lincoln freed the slaves. Yeah, I thought you were known as such a nice, respectable guy.
I could just ice you right now.
Is this a football movie or a golf movie? Or is it
neither?
Oh wow!
It's a James Spader fish out of water new high school movie where he hooks up with Robert Downey Jr., who is a drummer in a band, and they get into just high school shenanigans.
I have to check into it. I have to. Tough Turf.
I won't spoil the ending.
Tough Turf.
Tough Turf. It's out on Kino Lorber Blu-ray.
Okay, all right. So, and that was like the same year as The New Kids, which was not. If you love James Spader, I'd recommend it. But yeah. So, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, very interesting performance. It's a title I always heard. It was new, something you always saw in the video store, and it always seemed risque because of the title.
It's not
actually, when you watch it all, it's like, okay, something's missing. One of those things are missing. Got Lies and Videotape, but Sex Things seems to be gone.
No, they talk about it a lot. They talk about it.
But yeah, really enjoyed him in that. But as for who I'm picking as for best actor, I'm going to give it to Denzel Washington, and he got Game.
Look, son, why don't you go on? What you got there? Range Rover? Son. Why don't you go and get back in your Range Rover, man?
Yo, don't be trying to blow up the spot, all right?
Look, I'm not trying to disrespect you. Huh? I didn't hear what you said. Huh? What you say?
DeAndre!
You can't talk now, huh? Huh?
Are you okay? DeAndre?
What do you want? What do you want? What you find? Don't be afraid. Don't fall asleep off in your mind. I hope this rhyme gets you in time and space. Come to a different place where you hear spiritual, lyrical knowledge in your face.
One of my favorite movies I've seen of this year was He Got Game, and I just thought it was a great performance of him playing Jake Shuttlesworth, and basically him getting a chance to get out of prison to try to recruit his son to sign for a specific college university basketball team, and just trying to reconnect with his son years later, and just come back just for a week, and just how it tells that story and that interaction. But yeah, I think this is a movie I was surprised because I always knew the soundtrack or the music related to it, but just watching it, and I was kind of blown away with the performance and the overall story.
Yeah, this is the one I have not seen. It was added to my list earlier this year when it was lauded on Pure Cinema Pod. They talked about it at great length, and I don't know why I never watched it. It came out during a time when I was pretty much watching everything. I just slipped through the cracks. All right, on to my actor category, which it's a bit scattered here. Charles Boyer in Clooney Brown, 1946. This worked as a reminder that I need to watch more movies starring Charles Boyer because he was so much fun in this movie, and I've barely skimmed the surface of his filmography. From there, we can go to James Garner and the Americanization of Emily. I watched, I think, 13 or 14 James Garner movies this year.
Oh, wow.
Not all of them were first-time watches. Some of them I just put in again. I'm a big James Garner fan. Moving along, Gene Hackman in The Conversation, 1974. I had been hounded to watch The Conversation for a long time. I finally watched it, and it was worthy. Gene Hackman is fantastic. And then we have Robert Mitchum in The Night of the Hunter, 1955. And my last pick is Buster Keaton in Sherlock Jr., 1924. I somehow, in my viewing of the Buster Keaton box set, did not watch Sherlock Jr. until this year. It's one of those weird things where you put on a movie you think you've seen before, and it's not anything that you remember. But yeah, it's one of the greatest breaking of the fourth wall scenes, and I could have seen basically any Buster Keaton movie I'd seen for the first time. He could have made this list. I should note that the Gene Hackman nomination for The Conversation cancels out his nomination for Night Moves. There was some split in the balloting there. Probably is no surprise, but it's Robert Mitchum in Night of the Hunter.
Nice. Now where, boy? Where?
Under the stone on the floor.
This is concrete.
John made a sin. John told a lie.
The Lord's a talking to me now. He's a saying, a liar is an abomination before mine eyes. Speak, boy, where's it hid? Speak. Speak or I'll cut your throat and leave you to drip like a hog hung up in butchering time.
Pearl, shut up. Pearl, you swore.
You could save him, little bird.
It's not my dough. It's not my dough.
The dog. Why, sure. Last place anybody think to look.
Mitchum has a type of persona that he loves that persona so much that he kind of played it in damn near every movie he ever made. Except maybe Holiday Affair, where it may be the nicest version of Robert Mitchum ever captured on screen, and he kind of let the unsaid do a lot of his work for him, and that's not to take anything away from his talent, but he rarely, I don't think, exercised all that many acting muscles. So in Night of the Hunter, I think is the greatest stretch of those abilities. And I don't know what brought this out of him, whether it was Lawton or the screenplay itself, but his Harry Powell is just such a cunning and sadistic bastard. He scars himself by tattooing love and hate on his knuckles, sort of blurring that pristine image we have of Mitchum. He's somehow this erotic figure that's empowered and repulsed by sex, and his hatred of sex so distorts his worldview that he's driven to acting out against it in order to suppress and act out his own desires, which is eliminating people because they have crossed him or have crossed his religion, whatever that religion might be. And he's successful at peddling this righteousness that he claims, because the people in this town, we talked about the pastoral quality and the simple people that inhabited this world, and these people wanted to be that pure. They wanted to seem as pure as this character. They were no better or worse than he was. They just didn't act out on this compulsion. There's this irrational idealism that they seem to strive to attain, and Mitchum pursues this he's like a confidence trickster. He goes around and earns this trust and respect before he unleashes his true, ghastly self on these poor people. And as an audience, I think it's interesting because we have the extra textual knowledge of Mitchum's on-screen persona that we bring into this movie like baggage, and it's almost like he revels in turning that against us too. Like, we're buying into this character as much as anybody else in these towns, and I don't think it's at all a stretch to say that Robert Mitchum in Night of the Hunter had to influence the on-screen portrayal of Hannibal Lecter 36 years in the future. For both actor Anthony Hopkins and Robert Mitchum, these definitely became career-defining performances, and it really shows what Robert Mitchum was capable of. And I loved Robert Mitchum, but this was an entirely different kind of role for him.
Oh yeah, I would agree. He plays the coach in that championship season. Can easily be is the same character as the president in Scrooged, of the president of the television channel. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so it is a standout performance from Mitchum in Night of the Hunter, and I really need to go back and rewatch that.
It's funny. I had two other Mitchum movies on my short list, and the more I thought, I love Mitchum in the movies. He's perfectly cast, but he's not asked to do more. That being Blood on the Moon, which I mentioned prior, and Out of the Past. He allows others to project onto his performances because he's kind of blank slate. Sounds derogatory, but I don't think it is in this instance. And in both of those movies, he's kind of playing with the same sort of steely, smolder, kind of the enigmatic roles that he was really known for at the time. And I don't think it's also derogatory to say that he just looked great on camera. He had that star quality that just drew you into the character he was playing, and that's not something that just pure raw acting ability really fosters.
Favorite adapted screenplay?
Americanization of Emily. No idea if the book is even as anti-war as the movie turned out to be. Chilly Scenes of Winter, and I know it's been mentioned in the Danny Perry books. And I've had this. This was a Twilight release. I actually got it from the Amoeba store in San Francisco several years ago. Finally watched it. It's John Hurt and Mary Beth Hurt.
Mary Beth Hurt, yeah.
Mary Beth Hurt and John Hurt are in it, and Joan Macklin Silver,
the recently deceased Joan Macklin Silver, fortunately,
director.
You know that it had a name change. You know about this?
Yeah, it's Head Over Heels, or
Head Over Heels, and it had a happy ending.
Yeah, and I think I looked at the YouTube happy ending, or the happy ending on YouTube, and it didn't really make that much sense. It didn't fit the story, I don't think, at all. But yeah, it's weird that it sounded like it had such a weird production history. But what a horrible name, I think, for Head Over Heels.
It's dreadful.
Yeah, but I will say it made me appreciate John Hurt because I was it's not, is it Cutter's Way? Is that him and Jeff Bridges?
Yeah.
That is a movie that I did not get. I know it's got a big following, but it's something I didn't get, and I found his performance to be basically seems like he's playing a pirate kind of, but I mean he's just like a veteran Vietnam vet, but his performance felt very like I think he had an eye patch and just reminded me of like Captain Jack Sparrow, but this movie impressed me with his acting. I thought it was great, but I thought it was a good story. Next, The World According to Garp, that championship season, which is based on a play by Jason Miller, and then he ended up directing this movie. And then Star 80, it was adapted from a news article about the death of Dorothy Stratton. Going to go with Star 80 just because it's amazing that it came from just a news article and how much depth they added to the story to put it on screen.
I have this feeling about Dorothy. She's going to be a big star.
They're gonna give me $10,000 for having my picture taken.
Dorothy is every man's fantasy. Sit down. Dorothy, you just can't let him do this to you. Do you want her, pal? You can have her. But you're gonna have to pay.
Star 80, rated R.
I also had Patty Chayefsky for The Americanization of Emily. To have Lily Hayward and Harold Shoemate. I didn't look that one up. For Blood on the Moon, 1948. Samuel Hoffenstein and Elizabeth Reinhardt for Clooney Brown. James Agee and Charles Lawton for Night of the Hunter. And Daniel Mainwaring for Out of the Past. And my pick is Clooney Brown.
Oh, I feel so wonderful, so free.
Clooney Brown, what are you doing here?
Uncle Arn.
What does this mean? What are you doing on that there couch?
I've been plumbing, Uncle Arn. Just plumbing.
What?
Don't take that piece, sir. It's on the right. Much better.
What?
It hasn't so much fat, and it's bigger and browner. You won't regret it, sir.
So this is the final completed Lubitsch film, and it's also one of his most, and I needed to borrow the phrase from the Criterion website because I couldn't get it out of my head as I was writing the blurb. It was one of his most effervescent creations, and it's perfectly succinct. I didn't really need to add anything else to it. It's a script about a heroine with a plumbing obsession. She's a simple character. I don't mean simple to mean that she's lacking any depth, really. She's a woman who wants to dabble in a man's profession. And this really infuriates her plumber uncle, who sends her away to be something more womanly, a parlor maid at a stuffy country manor. And here she continuously oversteps the bounds of being a good, silent, unseen servant. She can't help but insert herself into conversations for which she had something to add. So she's far more capable than anyone gives her credit for or will allow. And as I said before, Jennifer Jones is just remarkable in this. She's so fun and brings this character to life along the way. She falls in love. Well, she doesn't know she falls in love, but I mean, we're all working towards this love affair with Charles Boyer. He's pursuing her, and it doesn't occur to her that she's allowed to be with Charles Boyer. And he's a supremely eccentric writer living in exile from the Nazis. In this script, written by Samuel Hoffenstein and Elizabeth Reinhardt, Lubitsch really subverts the class hierarchy and rigid gender roles. And, Lubitsch does what Lubitsch does. He does it so skillfully. And I don't know where the script ends and Lubitsch begins, but it doesn't really matter. It might be a little less sophisticated than the usual Lubitsch comedy. And And maybe it is a lesser Lubitsch when you're comparing it directly to, Shop Around the Corner, To Be or Not to Be, Ninochka, Design for Living. I mean, the guy just made great movies. It was some of the series of the greatest comedies ever. So sure, we can call this a lesser Lubitsch, but it's also probably better than any film most capable directors will ever make. So lesser, okay, but
Would you
still tremendous.
I guess for introduction to Lubitsch, would this be a good movie to break in with, or would you recommend something?
I would not. I don't know. I wouldn't start here because it's.
Very late in the career.
It's late career, and it's a little bit lighter. I mean, it does go, like I said, it goes into undermining the class and gender roles. So it's got some of that bite and clever phrasing to subvert these societal norms. But To Be or Not to Be, maybe the quintessential Lubitsch. It's political and incredibly funny. That and Shop Around the Corner, I think, are kind of at the top. Then again, I wouldn't say a bad thing about Design for Living either, but then you've got the musicals too, which are just pure joy, like Smiling Lieutenant with Maurice Chevalier. He did that series of early sound musicals, and those are all a blast too. So it's hard to not pick a good Lubitsch movie. I don't think I've ever seen a bad one.
Favorite original screenplay?
For screenplays, I look at probably the most unique story put on film, something that's kind of a little bit completely outside of the normal story process, and no particular order. Bamboozled, directed by Spike Lee. I'm not sure if Spike Lee wrote it. I really should have wrote the people who wrote the movies with this group. Would have been helpful. But yeah, Bamboozled. It feels very of its time, like very 2000. That was like when I was a young teenager, and just that change right before like 9/11. And I just feel like it captures just that weird time, and before the internet and stuff like that. And it was just like television was still kind of the king of everything, and start of like reality TV and all that stuff. But just an amazing script. Just a TV writer, just coming up with a show, and basically it just uses a lot of the show kind of built on racial stereotypes, and the public still accepts it, even though it's like blatantly racist and the stereotypes, but how it becomes this big hit. But yeah, just an amazing story, interesting script. Was really kind of shocked it was even made, but it is a Criterion release. I would recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. Sorry to bother you. Where this movie went was completely bonkers and was not what I was expecting.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, and but interesting concept, storytelling. And to be honest, like if you probably want to anything best screenplay, it's going to be something kind of like being John Malkovich. Anything that's just completely different and out there for film is probably what I would see as like, oh, that's a very interesting like story and putting it on film. Next is Boys in the Hood,
directed by Boots Riley. Just to put that in. Boots Riley.
And then next is Boys in the Hood. I believe this is John Singleton. Is it? This is a movie I just always knew about and kind of knew it was there and heard about it, but just was not expecting where it went and just how much emotion was jam packed into it. So I was really impressed with this. And then this is probably going to be the most out there pick, and probably more should be in the B picture.
Wait a minute. More out there than Sorry to bother
you. Maybe just in like it's not a prestige pick, but Fade to Black, which has been on Shudder. Give credit to Werner Zimmerman, but basically a kid that is a little on the deep end, and basically kind of starts.
Zimmerman also did The Unholy Rollers. I should add.
Yeah, I saw
and his
Bobby
crowning
Joe.
achievement, Teen Witch.
Let's go back the other way.
No, just go up and talk to him.
Are you kidding? I'm so embarrassed. Look at how funky he is. I will never be hip.
Oh, damn. Shit. Oh, I have to look into that. If I enjoyed, because I did enjoy Fade to Black a substantial amount, even though I heard it had a troubled production with Zimmerman at the helm. But yeah, basically a lonely kid who's a film buff, a nerd, and basically he kind of starts to lose it and starts killing people, just like in the movies, like The Mummy or Dracula. When I watched it, I just reminded me of Remington Steele because of the movie references and like the flashback. There's like one scene where he acts as like Cagney and shoots up a place. And it's a weird scene because here he is, he's like reenacting these movies and he becomes a killer and he rents a 1930s car, gets a Tommy gun. And I'm like, how are you doing this as a kid? And for best, that's going to be my best adapted screenplay is Fade to Black.
This is Eric. Eric Binford.
Double-crossing squealers, both of you.
I go to a lot of movies. It's my thing.
You know what I do to squealers?
Why don't you live in the real world with the rest of us?
If you're so smart, Stella, tell me what James Cagney's name was in White Heat.
Binford he's sick in the head. He's like retarded or something.
Here's to us, top of the world.
I'm a great admirer. I just wanted to meet you.
Happy birthday to you.
I once went to 3 movies every day.
By Vernon
Nice.
Zimmerman. But yeah, I'd say it may be horror. If it is, it's very light horror. Vinegar Syndrome just did a release of it. I think it's the first time it may be on like even DVD or Blu-ray for some physical media besides like VHS. But it was on Shudder earlier in the summer, which is how I saw it.
That's a great pick. I mean, I didn't see it coming, but there it is. All right, so my original screenplay picks. I have Philip Jordan for The Big Combo. I just think that's a really smart noir screenplay. Francis Ford Coppola for The Conversation, 1974. Norman Krasna and Vina Del Mar for Hands Across the Table, 1935. That's my dark horse pick for the category. That's another Carol Lombard movie that starts in screwball and kind of winds itself into romantic melodrama. But it's actually a pretty nifty screenplay that does show off the best of Lombard and McMurray's personality. McMurray gets to be, smarmy, wise ass, pretty boy, formerly rich guy who's now completely broke, and she plays a manicurist. And they both swear to each other that they're not falling in love with each other because it would be better off if they found people with actual money. So the movie is about how they're not falling in love, and simultaneously trying to find other romantic interests which have a greater financial security. As I said, it's just kind of charming, and I was going through my Carol Lombard movies. That one really, really stood out for me. If you like the way that it showcases its stars, it's a terrific screenplay. Next on the list, I have Anthony Perkins and Stephen Sondheim, The Last of Sheila, 1973. A terrific, twisty murder mystery, and it does feel like just a whole bunch of buddies got together on a boat and shot a movie. But the screenplay is so good at giving you the misdirection you need not to figure out who's behind the murders. Then my last one is Alan Sharp, Night Moves, 1975. Neo-noir I talked about. It seems a lot of the noir movies are coming back on this list, but I really did enjoy those first watches for Noir-vember this year. So they do seem to dominate. And I didn't have any horror movies from this year, which is weird. Usually some sneak in there. But My pick for Best Original Screenplay is Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation.
Do you think we can do this?
Tired of drinking anyhow.
What a stupid conversation.
Stan, please, I'm trying to work. Tired of mostly everything.
Tired of me?
Tired of you. But not today.
What the hell are they talking about, for Christ's sake?
Stanley, please, I'm trying to get this done.
All right, don't get excited.
Well, I'm getting fed up.
About what?
About your asking me questions all day long.
Jesus.
Don't say that.
Well, for Christ's sake,
Stan, don't say that again, please. Don't use that word in vain. It bothers me.
What's the matter, Harry?
Your work's getting sloppy.
Later in the week. Sunday, maybe.
Sunday, definitely.
We had a much better track here if you'd paid more attention to the recording, less attention to what they were talking about.
Well, I can't see why a couple of questions about what the hell's going on can get you so out of joint.
Because I can't sit here and explain the personal problems of my clients.
See, and this is something that's on my cinema shame, and especially considering I'm such a huge Hackman fan. This is something I've started it, just never finished it, but it needs to be watched.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I'm not even sure how someone writes this screenplay. I've done some screenwriting. I took screenwriting in college. I've been in various stages of film production. And I was watching this movie and how it uses the replay of sound. And I don't know how anyone conceives of this on the page. So the story is that Gene Hackman is a surveillance expert, freelance. He records and plays back and tries to dig out what's in the recording. So the movie in question is about one specific conversation. It's aptly titled. And he keeps replaying that conversation, snippets, rewind, listens, rewind. Watching this movie, thinking about how the screenplay was constructed, I do need at some point to go to find the screenplay and see just how Coppola put this movie together on the page, because it really is, without spoiling the mystery of it, I don't get it. And it's so well paced. And the tension is constantly creeping in the more that he digs into this recording and pulls out more sounds. And he's starting to put together the pieces of what's actually going on. I feel this way about certain musicians. Like, I understand how a movie gets put together. There are some musicians, jazz musicians in particular, like, I don't understand how their brain works. I don't understand how they can improvise on the spot something different and unique and new each time. I feel that way about The Conversation.
How would it compare to something, or have you seen Blow Up?
There are some similarities there. De Palma is a different world in the way that he paces his film, just by being Brian De Palma, and I do like Blowout quite a bit. This feels as much like a Coppola film as that does the De Palma film. And I'll fall back on the only in the 70s mantra, but really only in the 70s were you allowed this kind of experimentation within a mainstream release. And this was nominated for screenplay, if I remember correctly.
It was like Best Picture too, right? Or
it was nominated for Best Picture. It lost to Godfather 2.
Yeah.
So he did all right that year.
Favorite director?
I want to consider this a cheat, because I just watched a lot of Spike Lee this year. Spike Lee, I got him here 3 times. He got
dominating Game. The category.
He got Game, Malcolm X and Bamboozled. The other two are Bob Fosse for Star 80 and then Joan Micklin Silver for Chilly Scenes of Winter. It's going to go to Spike Lee for Malcolm X.
Do you know where you came from? What's your name?
Malcolm Little.
No. That's the name of the slave masters who own your family. You don't even know who you are. Who are you?
Say Roseland. Roseland.
He was a pusher, a hustler, a thief.
You ready to tackle the streets? Yeah, I'm ready. Let him come.
He was loved, respected, convicted.
State your number, Little. I forgot it.
In a dream that's divine.
He was a prisoner who set himself free.
A Muslim must be strikingly upright. I will not touch the white man's drugs, his liquor, his women, so that those in the darkness can see the power of the light. I will not lie, cheat, or steal.
I believe you will remain faithful. Yes.
He was a follower who became a leader.
You're not an American. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us.
He brought honor to disobedience.
I suggest you look outside that window.
You've been laying down and bowing down for 400 years. I think it's time to stand up.
All right, break it up. You got what you wanted.
No, I'm not satisfied.
I was just blown away by like a biographical film and just a great movie. And just amazing scenes in it. There's that scene of Denzel Washington and Spike Lee coming down the street, just dancing, or just that whole scene, and just seeing that in a biographical movie. I was not expecting that, and Spike Lee still has his style in the movie, and I appreciate that. Which I feel like sometimes get lost in where kind of Oscar baity or biographical films where the subject matter kind of takes over. But I still think Spike Lee tells the story, but puts his storytelling pieces to use. The interesting thing is I enjoyed Denzel Washington's performance in He Got Game more, but his performance in Malcolm X is amazing.
That was a movie I was just talking about rewatching too. I recognize that it had been, I think I saw it in the theater and I haven't seen it since, but it really struck me, and it caught me at a time where I was aware of Malcolm X, but beyond the name and reputation, I really didn't have any context. And it's an important movie for me, looking back, and the way I looked at biographies. There aren't really many great ones, or I would even say there aren't many good ones.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I find that they often resort to lazy characterizations. Like they don't really let the characters inhabit the space because they're too busy trying to run them through events and places and dates that as like something referential that you have an anchor to. And I don't find that interesting.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it could, and I also just wonder, is it, well, going back to your point about biography, it feels like it's just here's a step-by-step guide. And especially like, I feel like the first thing that comes to mind with biographies is like a musical biography type film, where it does feel like it's this step one, step two process. And it's just like, hey, we got to hit these notes, their rise, their fall. It is probably one of the superior biographical films out there. Like this is how one should be made versus, I'm thinking Walk the Line.
It feels so routine. It hits the notes. Walk Hard is a masterpiece. The musical biopics are just the only one in recent memory that I really felt like nailed it was the Brian Wilson movie with John Cusack.
Love and Mercy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That movie got it.
did hit on it. And
Well, they didn't substitute makeup and as character.
yeah,
Like just making someone that looks like him and can perform the tics. John Cusack didn't try to replace Brian Wilson. John Cusack created a character named Brian Wilson that told a story. And that's what most of these movies seem to lack. Like Ray is a perfect example of the kind of movie I'm thinking of. Like Jamie Foxx did a brilliant impersonation of Ray Charles. It was spot on, but it didn't make me any more interested in the movie and the story they were telling.
yeah. And I'm trying to think of like some recent. I feel like the ones that come to mind are like the biographical. Like I think HBO did one of LBJ at specific time points in his life, and then I think there was one with Woody Harrelson, and it was just hard to. It was more like it seemed like it was more about that actor becoming that like it was the makeup job of like, oh, he looks and sounds like LBJ, versus like trying to focus on that story and making either that story come alive or have its weight and importance.
I think it needs to be considered like an adaptation.
Yeah.
I don't want you to regurgitate names and facts and places and settings unless they're part of your story, unless it's essential to the story you want to tell. If you're just showcasing vignettes from this person's life with no real through line, there's no arc, there's no story being told that isn't just this is what the guy did, enjoy this performance. It's great for Oscar Beatty stuff. The Freddie Mercury movie to me is one of the greatest offenders of this.
Oh yeah. Hey, Oscar winning.
Right. Again, Oscar winning performance. Okay. I mean, I didn't hate the performance. I didn't like the movie at all.
Yeah, wasn't impressed with the movie.
But
again, it felt like it was hitting. Hey, we got to get to this song. We got to get to this point where this song.
This is when he created such and such a song. This is when he created such and such a song. I'm like, that's not how songwriting works. Okay, number one, like you're just pretending like we don't care. Maybe we do. I mean, maybe we don't care. I guess most people didn't care because they seem to like the movie. But yeah, Malcolm X tells us a story. And whether or not we're familiar with Malcolm X, the person, whether we lived through that stage in our history, it doesn't matter. Spike Lee does such a masterful job of presenting that character truthfully and honestly to get the point he needs to make across as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
My picks for director, my list was long. I narrowed it down as best as I could, and I feel guilty for everyone that didn't get a nomination, even movies that I haven't mentioned so far, like Purple Noon, Renee Clement. I thought he did a great job with that movie. John Ford and She Wore Yellow Ribbon also didn't make any other list, but I saw a slightly different side to John Ford in that movie that I found very enjoyable. But on to the actual nominees here. Some of these are familiar, unfortunately. We have Robert Wise for Blood on the Moon, 1948.
Oh, wow, that's Robert Wise. Wow,
it is indeed. It's remarkable. It's Robert Wise directing a Western, and I say Western only because that is the setting, but it is really noir. I think there's so much more noir DNA in that. It's about a whole bunch of double crossings and shady characters, and Robert Mitchum is playing a guy who really doesn't care about anybody but himself, or so he thinks, until his own personal moral code is crossed, and then he decides to take action. Like it feels so noir, but yet all of these tropes are being pulled from the Western genre. And then on top of it, you have Robert Wise, who is just an absolute master of light and shadow, and it just reinforcing this noir feel to it. Yeah, I love that movie. And after that, let's move on down. Francis Ford Coppola, The Conversation. We just talked about him a little bit. Greta Gerwig for Little Women. I absolutely loved what she did with that movie. None of the other adaptations really interested me all that much. I like them, but I did not find them particularly memorable. I know some people are screaming at me right now for the 90, I guess it's 94 version, but I also found that ultimately just kind of forgettable. But Greta Gerwig had a definitive vision for her version of Little Women and made it her own movie, made it her own story while still remaining largely true to the source material. And it is the true spirit of adaptation. Robert Altman for McCabe and Mrs. Miller, insert groans here. And this is where I could not leave one of these two out. They were too important to me here in cinema, so I included them both. I am talking about Charles Laughton for Night of the Hunter and Jacques Tourneur for Out of the Past. And I may have just given away my winner with my Robert Wise conversation.
Blood on the Moon, a peril-packed saga of the grazing lands, of stampeding cattle and ruthless men who ride by day and kill by night. Blood on the Moon, starring Robert Mitchum, who dares invade a Gunsmoke barricade, an adventurous stranger with several notches on his gun, but none on his conscience. What do you want?
Sorry about your son, Mr. Bond. You can believe that if you want to.
Barbara Bell Geddes, who can hold back a man with a bullet or hold him close with a kiss.
You'll go now, unless you want more of that.
I don't want more of it, Jim. But I won't go.
Robert Preston, the man behind the unrelenting range war.
I've seen dogs wouldn't claim you for a son, Tate.
Here is breathtaking adventure, rough, rousing, roaring, to match an absorbing love story as daring and exciting as the old pioneer West.
I watched it on the Criterion Channel. It happened to be, I have this terrible habit of watching only what's leaving the Criterion Channel. I will turn it on and go, I want to watch that. Okay, let's go to see what I'm going to miss. And I will just start picking things from the leaving this month category. Blood of the Moon was one of those that was leaving, and I clicked on it, and like, oh, Robert Wise. I didn't know how lovely for me to find this out. And it really was a Robert Wise movie. He had total control over that production.
Favorite legit grade A feature film?
We're on to the very special time of evening. This is when the Academy Awards are winding down, at least 90 minutes after they said they would. They just want to go home. And now let's hear your 5 Best Picture nominees.
No particular order. Something Wild, Malcolm X, He Got Game, Star 80, and Bamboozled. I feel like it's a good variety. We'll say, like, listening to your list, holy shit, like, I got to watch some older films. I think the oldest film I have is the Americanization of Emily, which is just 64. But I will say, I feel like this year was probably like the most late 80s, 90s films I've ever probably watched. But yeah. But probably the Best Picture, it's probably Something Wild. I want to go with Something Wild. This was just a complete surprise.
Dear Sirs, in response to your inquiry, stocks acquired before 1 January 84 should not be subject to anti-straddle rules.
Charles S. Driggs, upwardly mobile, recently promoted, house in the suburbs, father of two.
The usual closing, Charles S. Driggs.
At 2:30 on a Friday afternoon, what's about to happen to Charles is something wild.
I'm Lulu.
Charles, pleased to meet you.
Wait, where are we going? You don't turn around and take me back. You're going to make me do something that I don't want to do.
I can hardly wait, Charlie.
I've never done anything like this before.
Don't worry, Charlie, I have.
I mean, look straight, but right down in here, that's where it counts. Deep down, I got what it takes.
If you were my mother and I brought this guy home as my husband, what would you think?
Very nice. But I'd get rid of those handcuffs if I were you.
Do I look like the kind of guy who would run out on a check? I mean, come on. What a gal, Ray. I mean, what a gal.
Wild thing, think I love you.
Oh, my gosh.
Charles Driggs!
Hey,
It just maybe it's like early in the pandemic, so it was like, maybe things, this is just going to be a couple weeks type situation. This will be over. We'll be back to work or be back in the office or whatever. Didn't have any expectations, but as soon as it started, just the music, that Talking Head song in it, and just the performances and the story. Didn't know what was going on. Road trip movie. I'm down for that. So it just hit all the spots. And I feel like I was in a Jonathan Demme mood. I think I watched Philadelphia. Watched what is this? Is it Prison Heat? What is this? One of his Corman movies. I feel like I watched that one.
Caged Heat? Okay.
Yeah, Caged Heat. But yeah, and just a complete surprise. I think I was also going through. I think I rewatched Silence of the Lambs, so I was just like going through that Demme phase. But yeah, and this Something Wild was new, and it just perfect time. It felt like an easier time in spring, not knowing what was coming ahead. So, take me back to that joy of just watching something new, not having too much to worry about. It also
feels like, talking about in the career of Jonathan Demme, it feels like one of those movies you make early in someone's career that they're unbroken. That they make a movie sort of in a creative void, like the expectations have not been placed on them. They're making something that feels maybe frivolous and personal and eccentric.
Once the Oscar came along for Silence of the Lambs, I feel like he became more prestige in that sense. And those movies are still good, but I feel like he couldn't make something like Something Wild. And also, I feel like Married to the Mob falls into that situation too, where it's just these bizarre, not bizarre, I'd say like quirky comedies that just these weird
feels more Hollywood
situations,
though, less personal. Maybe I still enjoy it, but yeah, it doesn't. I don't know if it has quite the same feel. I will say Melvin and Howard. I had forgotten that was a Jonathan Demme movie, so thank you for reminding me about that. Truly wonderful performance from Mary Steenburgen. She went for that, or was just nominated anyway. Doesn't matter. It's a great performance. Early Jonathan Demme movie.
Oh, she won Best Actress in Supporting Role, and it got Best Screenplay.
I believe it. It's a really good movie, and it just seems to not get mentioned much. Proof and point. I didn't even recall it was a Demme movie when you started talking about him, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was like it was a Twilight release, and I think I picked it up in the most recent, or in their last sale, or I guess they're still going, just not under the same. I don't know how their whole process is, but yeah. So yeah, that's something that I need to add to my list. And I don't know. I feel like for some reason when I'm thinking of Melvin and Howard, I'm thinking of Ed and Reuben. And well, I enjoyed Ed and Reuben. I hope that movie is not like that, but who knows?
No. My 5 nominees are, you probably say it along with me at this point. Actually, no, I did throw a wrinkle in this one. All right. Blood on the Moon, 1948. Clooney Brown, 1946. Elevator to the Gallows, 1958. Then we have The Night of the Hunter and Out of the Past, 1947. That's a lot of Mitchum right there. Wow, pulling it all together. The Conversation, Little Women, and Night Moves were the regrettable also rans on that list. Not surprising to say that I'm going to pick Night of the Hunter. I've said probably all I need to say about it at this point, so I won't rehash it. But it was the only movie I rated 5 stars this year.
Ben never told you throw it in the river, did he?
I can hear you whispering, children, so I know you're down there. I can feel myself getting awful mad.
Here is all the passion and suspense, the heart-pounding warmth of the best-selling novel that gripped millions.
Well, wake up! Come on, Pearl!
Superb, unforgettable performances by an extraordinary array of talent.
Figured I was gone, huh?
Run, hide in the staircase. Run quick! Ruby, shit! What do you want?
I want them kids.
I'm giving you to the count of 3 to get out of here, then I'm coming across the kitchen shooting you.
The combined powers of Paul Gregory and Charles Lawton brought the King Mutiny Court-Martial to Broadway. Now the screen receives that same creative, electrifying impact. The Night of the Hunter.
Favorite B movie or whatever. Okay, seriously now, who made these rules? You know, I guess we just got to go with that. Favorite B movie, folks.
Category I created for my blog post because every year there were movies that I thought were just great entertainment. They probably didn't qualify for the main attraction. And I'm not saying that, you know, bad or lesser movies couldn't make my list, but there's a different kind of category for the B movie. And I'm talking about low budget things, low aspiration, true B movies, just oddballs that you wanted to make mention of. There's room in everyone's watch party for those types of movies, and I wanted to encourage the discovery of more of those little weirdos. So, the B movie category, what have you got for me?
All right, so I got this 5. So let's see if I got the ones that have not been mentioned. Deadbeat at Dawn. This was on Shudder. It was part of one of the Joe Bob Briggs marathon things. Just a weird, cheap movie filmed in Cincinnati, basically about a gang. I believe it was the late 70s was when it was filmed, but it's just this bonkers little gang movie, like the cheapest Warriors knockoff you can come on. I don't even know if it is a Warriors knockoff. It's just gang related, and it's just so over the top of this guy who's out to get revenge. And it's just a weird setting of Cincinnati, and because my wife's family is from Cincinnati, and there was a place they refer to as Over the Rhine, which is where part of the movie was shot, and it's a gentrified area now, but it was a very rough area back in the day, and it was like a place you didn't go to. So it was entertaining to see something I've heard about in a movie. But so Deadbeat at Dawn, Dr. Detroit, the classic Dan Aykroyd.
Oh, Dan Aykroyd, peak Dan Aykroyd.
Peak Dan Aykroyd, basically. Gets caught up in a situation where he has to play a pimp to help some prostitutes out, and
that old story.
Which brings up the question: could a prostitution business subsidize a college, a small college in, I guess, Detroit or Chicago? Chicago. He's in Chicago, I believe. Yeah. So that was the big question. Find it tough to believe with the way education prices have gone through the roof. But weird, bonkers performance. Great James Brown performance in there. It's singing the song Dr. Detroit. Next is Jack's Back with James Spader. Yeah, this movie had me in like the first 20 minutes. I thought I had this figured out. I'm like, how are they going to make this go for the next hour? And yeah, completely shocked. But James Spader playing with James Spader. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to ruin any surprises. But it really just watch it for the first 20 minutes, and if you're not hooked into where it goes because you're just wondering how in the hell is this possible, you just need to watch it. Next, Surviving the Game. Basically, Ice-T is a homeless man that is paid to come with these men and then basically hunted down. So it's like Predator, but without the predators are human. And then next, Fade to Black. Again, mentioned earlier in the screenplay. Dennis Christopher just has a great performance, and I think and this was right after I saw California Dreaming. He does really well at playing awkward teenagers. Best B picture, I'm gonna have to give it to Fade to Black. Close would be Jack's Back, but giving it to Fade to Black.
For my B movie pick, I put in The Devil Thumbs a Ride, which was a movie we talked about in the Noir episode also. Man, this keeps coming back here. I didn't even realize how many of these slipped in here. The Last of Sheila, which it's not exactly a B picture, but pure entertainment value.
Got a decent cast for a B picture.
Good Burger.
Never seen.
Excuse me. Look, I ordered one Good Burger with nothing on it.
And that's what I gave you.
No, you gave me a bun. Just a bun. Look, there's no meat in here.
But you said you wanted nothing on it.
Yes, well, I expected a meat patty.
Dude, a meat patty is something. You said nothing. Fizz, is a meat patty something or nothing? Something? I win.
I made the mistake of watching it with my 8-year-old, who then wanted to watch it nonstop. And it didn't get old. You know, the amount of repetition that I can usually withstand is very low, but I just didn't tire of Good Burger, and there's no explanation for it. Much like Good Burger itself, there's no explanation for it. It just is. It's just Good Burger. I will insert the clip now, and you can just hear it in your head all day long.
Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. Can I take your order?
Next, I listed The Vast of Night, which is a movie that was released just last year. I included it in the B picture because it was a very low-budget movie. Local radio broadcaster, he starts hearing unusual sounds. And it just so happens that a girl who is working the switchboard for the town also starts hearing these strange, repetitive sounds in her connections. So the two of them are trying to discover what is going on. Like, if you've heard this sound before, we've never heard this anywhere. Can you please call us and let us know? So it's another listening movie, much like we're talking about The Conversation. It's got a lot of the same feel. It's a lot of time, movie spends a lot of time with people listening intently to different sounds and broadcasts and conversations. So the guy on the radio starts taking calls from people who say they've heard that sound before. And every time they call, they tell a story. So it's as much about storytelling itself as it is uncovering the truth about what the sound is. And it's a fascinating little movie. It used to be on Amazon Prime. I think it's still available to watch there, but
yeah, it's still showing up on. It's showing as it's available on Prime. I'll check it out.
It took me by surprise, and it was a great little gem from last year. I believe it was made in 2019, released in 2020.
Oh yeah, 91-minute runtime. Can't go wrong with that.
Also on my list, I can't help but mention Fuller Report, and honestly, it would just have to star Ken Clark for me to make this list. The full title is Fuller Report, Base Stockholm, 1968, directed by Sergio Greco. None of this is relevant. Ken Clark,
race car driver.
Yes, Ken Clark plays a man named Dick Worth. He's an American racing driver in Stockholm who gets sucked into some sort of CIA operation when he's mistaken for a spy and is somehow shoved into this mission recovering, the Fuller Report. Ken Clark is not a great actor. Ken Clark is barely an animated human. What Ken Clark does really well is punch people and look very serious. And I have taken a great liking to the European films featuring Ken Clark. He had a very minor career in the United States before doing a bunch of Euro spy movies. Special Mission Lady Chaplin is my favorite among those. There's just they're very simple pleasures.
Only films I've seen that would be like parody of the Bond movies would be the Austin Power movies. Never seen any, well, unless I guess we count the 67 version of Casino Royale one, but yeah, none of the Euro spy movies. And I will say one of the first reviews, the most helpful reviews on IMDb lists the Fuller Report as one of the 7 Euro spy classics.
Well, the great thing about a lot of these Euro spy movies is that they're not active parodies of Bond. Some of them poke fun or ape the James Bond series. They go to great lengths to recreate certain things, and they get away with a lot of imitation. But that's not the ones that I'm the most interested in. I really enjoy the ones that do their own thing. I mean, they're derivative. There's not a lot of interesting innovations in the genre. But what they do well is create this sense of place and time and mood. And that mood is the 60s. And they love traveling all of Europe, and they use location shooting, and there's a sort of documentary feel to a lot of this because there's very little shooting on sets. They go out and they make the most of these European cities. And the other movies I mentioned, the other Ken Clark series, there's a series of 3 that are particularly notable. He plays Agent 077.
Mission Bloody Mary.
Mission Bloody Mary. All 3 of those, and then the Fury on the Bosphorus is the other one of the 3. Special Mission Lady Chaplin is a great movie. I recommend it to dabblers in the Euro spy genre. Ken Clark, he acts a little and punches people a lot.
Well, looking at some of the photos for Mission Bloody Mary, it looks like he's got this is 65, and it looks like he's got a tactical sweater on with the gun holster and everything.
He likes cardigans. I don't know how familiar you are with Mystery Science Theater episodes, but he's featured prominently in 12 to the Moon. And they go on a fantastic rant of nicknames about Ken Clark in the beginning of that film as they're launching the space capsule, which I'll have to include here.
Yeah, it's showing a very 3.1 rating on IMDb. Oof.
12 to the Moon?
12 to
it's abysmal, but the riff is tremendous. Did I pick a winner? I haven't picked a winner yet.
Haven't picked a winner yet.
Anyway, cheating a little bit on the B movie, I've got to give it to Last of Sheila because I had such a blast.
What's the game?
Well, the idea is to discover everybody's secret, without peeking, of course, and to prevent the other players from discovering yours.
And how would you do that?
Well, every day we'll park in a different port, where you can discover the proof of one person's secret. I'll announce what secret it is to look for, and give you a clue, which will tell you what to do and where to go on shore. Now, if you solve the clue properly, it'll lead you to where the proof is.
Maybe it's worth mentioning Herbert Ross here too, while we're on the topic of Last of Sheila, who is one of the probably the most under-heralded directors. He really did just about everything at one point or another, and did it well. You're looking at, Last of Sheila, and he did a lot with music. He did, Footloose.
I was looking at this list. Yeah, I was surprised to see he did The Secret of My Success and Steel Magnolias.
Yeah, he did a lot.
Had a good run in the 80s. Oh, Pennies from Heaven.
Yeah. Goodbye, Mr. Chips was his directorial debut. The guy made solid movies. And 7% Solution, I totally forgot about.
Michael Caine.
Goodbye Girl. And this one, he handles like a pro. The guy was a professional director, and he could adapt to any style. He had a particular love of music and using specific music in films. And maybe that's the through line for Herbert Ross. But he's someone that I've never, really studied a filmography for, but I'm always impressed by a Herbert Ross movie. It's not flashy, but he gets the job done and then some. All right, well that's our award show for this evening. I'm glad anyone has stuck around through the wee hours of this production, and thank you for showing up and sharing your favorite first-time watches for 2020. May 2021 bring better days and hopefully some trips back to the cinema at some point that would really make things a little bit better.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Pull it together enough to get a recording done.
Director in the history of cinema.
You have chosen wisely.